Hi folks, this is some information as to how relocating on a Pluto line is likely to affect you. As many of you know by now, I specialise in astrocartography and relocated charts, which is the art of mapping the planetary lines around the world to find the most supportive places to live and work. There's actually an awful lot more to it than that. You really need to understand your natal chart first in great detail, then also your transit chart, which is where the planets are now in your chart, because that's usually what's triggering the urge to move. Now, astrocartography is actually basically quite simple. What we're looking at is angles to the ascendant, descendant, midheaven, and IC, and how the planets are aspecting those angles, which is basically how those planets are actually interacting with those angles. So when we move to a Pluto line, we can be deeply transformed in a way that we may not expect. It may not necessarily be a Pluto transit that causes the urge for us to move. It may be a different transit. But the reason why your relocated chart is so important before you actually go to the mapping of the planetary lines is because the planets will usually change houses. Even a change of 20 to 50 miles can mean a planet can move from your second house to your third house, or from your 12th house to your first house. So, for example, when people relocate, sometimes they may have like 2 or 3 angular planets in their natal chart, but in their relocated chart they have 5 or 6 planets, which is something that happened to me when I lived in the States. My Sun and my Venus were angular on the IC. My Pluto was also angular on the descendant. And when I lived in Italy, Pluto was angular on my IC. And how that played out was very much from the beginning as an astrologer. The clients I was dealing with all had life and death type stories to tell me and to share with me. A lot of them had stillbirths or miscarriages or had a lot of death in their life before they came to me. So that was my own relocated Pluto moving closer to the IC, triggering those kind of clients. So again, Pluto was quite a misunderstood planet. Pluto was very much about deep, intense personal transformation. And sometimes the transformation is so subtle, we don't know that we're going through such a transformative time until maybe a couple of months later. And we look back and go, okay, so that's what was happening in my life. That's why I needed to change jobs or leave the relationship I was in or relocate. I mean, I know I talk a lot about astrocartography, but very often we can change our lives without relocating. Very often what we most need to do is to stay in the place where we actually are now till we work through the energy and the lessons of the transits that we're currently going through. So if you were to move to a place where your Pluto was angular on your descendant, for example, you would probably attract very intense transformative one-to-one relationships. That's not to say that you'd meet somebody and get married, or that you'd break up your relationship and go off and meet somebody else. It might mean that you form very intense partnerships with people that you then go to work with, because the descendant in the 7th house, there are long-term relationships, not necessarily our more formal relationships, but long-term one-to-one friendships, long-term one-to-one relationships with people we work with, which for anybody who is self-employed is hugely important. If Pluto moves to your midheaven in your relocated chart, you're going to be seen to be a transformative person or a change maker in some way, shape, or form. You may not necessarily be seen as a leader. It may be more that, you have become transformed in the public eye. So therefore, others are transformed by watching how much you have transformed. Pluto on the IC then is very much linked to death and rebirth. Again, it's not necessarily the death of someone. It could be the death of your home as you know it, in order for you to create a new home, a home that suits more the person who you are and the person who you've grown to. So this is why I always look at the relocated chart before the actual astrocartography, because basically with the astrocartography, we're always living near some of our lines in some shape or form, whether that's 20 miles away, whether that's 140 miles away, whether it's 90 miles away, because Aspects such as trines and conjunctions and oppositions will have radiuses of up to 138 miles, whereas aspects like septiles and quintiles will have much smaller radiuses of maybe 37 miles, which is why, the septiles and the quintiles are so important in astrocartography, because they symbolize genius and creativity. And as I said, very often we think we're relocating because we want a new relationship or a new career, but actually, our transits and our planetary lines will show actually we're seeking to be more empowered, because Pluto is also about empowerment. It's also about personally empowering ourselves. It's also about standing in our power, not abusing our power that we may or may not have over others, but standing in our own power. And particularly, as we're in the last weeks and months of Pluto in Capricorn before Pluto moves into Aquarius next year, we're certainly seeing a lot of power structures crumble all over the world, where we're going to be moving into a far more humanitarian and collective way of living. We're just not there yet. So this is one of the reasons I now have a personal 12-month astrology growth package. It's something I've been working on behind the scenes for quite a while. So for any of you that haven't worked with me before, you can start off by having a taster session, and the cost of the taster session comes off the three package session. So the session isn't necessarily geared towards the fact that you may or may not relocate. It's very much geared towards that you understand your natal chart first. You understand the underlying themes that you came into this lifetime to learn and experience. And then the transits, as I've said before, what you're going through now. So if you don't want to relocate, you can just have 2 or 3 transit sessions instead. So it's all linked on my website now, www.marthaclarkastrology.com. There's a couple of minor tweaks to be made to the website. We've been working on it behind the scenes for quite a few weeks now. And if any of you have any questions about working with me, or how I can help you more before you book the package, just drop me an email on info@marthaclarkastrology.com, because now, never more than now, is a time for us to really empower ourselves and to stand into our own power. And despite the chaos and the turmoil we've gone through in the last 3 years, to really come out of it and create a life that's completely in alignment with the life that we were always meant to live. So I look forward to talking to you all again soon, and thank you very much for listening.